Hi, this is Jean. It's March 25th, 2023, and I wanted to share with you my information about my speech to print Google Drive, and then a little bit about how I've started out with morphology instruction with some of my kids. Now, some background on this speech to print drive. This is not something that came from Sue Haglund or Beneath the Surface of Words. So this is not something that not everything in here would be approved of by the author of the book that we're studying for this book study. So it's just something that I personally am sharing with you. When I took my dyslexia certification through the University of Florida, one of the books that we read was Speech to Print by Louisa Moats. Louisa Moats is also the co-author of the LETRS program, LETRS, which a lot of folks are taking now to learn more about the science of reading. And because I had so many resources, I just went ahead and put them into a drive. And then I did facilitated a book discussion of speech to print. So that's where all of this stuff comes from. And then for this class, we would be looking at morphology. And I did not learn much about morphology in my graduate program for dyslexia. The only time we talked about morphology was when we studied the morphology chapter in speech to print. So we never learned about word matrices, word sums, and those kinds of things. And when I talked to Sue Haglund, the author of our book, she said what she would be looking for in a good morphology program is if they're using word matrices and word sums. So this is what I have in the morphology folder. Okay, first thing is additional resources for Beneath the Surface of Words. Here are some resources right here from the author on the top there. And then when she and I were speaking on the phone, she recommended this webinar that she recently gave about morphology and written English. So if you don't mind, please watch that before the third class meeting for this book study. And that will help us have a deeper understanding as we go into that question and answer, that first question and answer session with the author. Here's some structured word inquiry resources. And now I know like Pete Bowers, he pronounces it structured word inquiry. And I had a hard time doing that. So I'm just going to call it structured word inquiry or SWI. Tricia Martinez has a SWI playlist. And if you click on that playlist and you kind of scroll down, you'll see a bunch of videos from Pete Bowers, the co-founder of Structured Word Inquiry. And he talks about how to use the mini matrix creator. And that was a question that somebody had last time, which is how to make a word matrix. So he talks about making a word matrix out of word sums. Now, in my class, we've been doing it differently. We've been doing word matrices first and then making word sums out of that and then using those as our guided spelling words, which I'll show you in just a moment. And I talked to Sue Haglund and she said, yes, both ways. It's bi-directional because you're working with the bases and looking at the structures of the words. Okay, Rebecca Lovelace, I took a class from her. So she has trainings about how to implement this, and she has trainings even for various grade levels. So I took a general one, it was $150 last summer, but she also has specific trainings for those who teach younger kids and things like that. So you can go to her website there. And then she has something called the High Frequency Word Project, which you could also look into, especially those of you who teach in the younger grades, because it's talking about looking more at the structure of high frequency words. So if you think about like how people are doing heart words and putting parts above the non-decodable parts, instead of that, you can actually look at the structure and why the spelling of those words makes sense. So that's Rebecca Lovelace, something that she's working on. You can click on there. Gina Cook from LEX. She has a lot of information on there. She also has things you can purchase for working with morphology. And then she has some TED Ed videos explaining the structure of words. The Literacy Doctor, I think that there's a couple of educators on there, but I had talked on the phone to Jen Petrich, and she has a background in neuroscience. So she really has a good grasp of this, and that's at theliteracydoctor.com. And then there are some YouTube videos as well. And then she has some on her own. If you type in her name, and then structured word inquiry. Pete Bowers, the co-founder of SWI, that's the homepage. And he has many, many YouTube videos explaining structured word inquiry. I also am going to share with you in a bit part of one of his videos where he explains what we're talking about in this section, that SWI does include phonology. They do use phoneme graphing correspondences, but they also include the morphology and etymology. Okay, and then realspellers.org has a lot of information about different words and how you can look at them. So those are some SWI, resources. And then I think you have to be careful with teachers pay teachers. I typed in word matrix or word matrices or something, and some stuff came up, and I looked at it, and some of it, like where they had the base, there was more than a base in there. So not all of it is super accurate. However, if you're looking into these expensive morphology books, which I'll show you in just a moment, I just think you might be better off just going ahead and just looking at some stuff off of Teachers Pay Teachers, just look at the previews and then get some ideas. Now, structured word inquiry folks would say that you need to be working on the words that the students are seeing in their reading and writing and things like that. But for me getting started, it helped to start with some specific bases and work from there. And then I will show you my Google Drive with curriculum samples in the morphology portion of the speech to print Google Drive. This is how we got started in my room working with morphology. Now, when I talked to Sue Haglund on the phone a couple of days ago, she pointed out, and she had pointed this out the last time we did this class as well, that, we're not supposed to come out of this class just knowing, or this book discussion, knowing everything about how words work. But she just wants us to have more of an understanding of the structure of words. And that has helped me to not feel like I have to overdo it. So when things have come up in my curriculum, which is SIPs, I am able to point out, oh, look at how this is part of this, or something like that, just by knowing these things without getting into super depth about it. And then what I started with some 4th and 5th graders looking at some word bases and playing off of that. And now that's a bit late to get started. That's the traditional age. But as we have been learning, we can be looking at the structure of words from the beginning, and that's actually going to help kids a lot, especially with their spelling. So what I did is I just put a base down on a piece of paper. It took me a few seconds to type it. And then the kids just added prefixes and suffixes. And then we talked about, let's see. So with Grace, we talked about when you add a suffix, whether you would need that whether you drop the E or not. And most of the time, if the suffix is starting with a vowel, then you drop that E, like GRACIOUS. And if it's starting with a consonant, like full, then you would not drop that E in Grace. The love one came from something I'll show you in a moment that came off of Real Spellers, and I just kind of condensed it. And then we talked about free and bound bases, and I put up rupt. And then with that one, I had them come up with some prefixes and suffixes. And then we did some of the pages out of one of the books. And then they came up with more that they had seen in the book. And then they, before I gave them the pages in the book, I had them try to tell me what they thought based on what these words are, what rupt means. And then we would take this and we would make word sums. So un plus e plus rupt plus ed, like an unerupted volcano. Now that's going to be one of our guided spelling words. Then a couple of things that happened. So we were wondering, is it ABLE or IBLE? So you see this ABLE is off on its own. But with this one, it's going to be the IBLE. And I feel like we talked about that last semester when we did this as to why that is sometimes. And I feel like that might be coming up. So I put that there and I said, we're gonna come back to that later this year. And then with love, oh, I can't think of what they had. I wish they wouldn't have taken it off. They had a suffix on here. And I looked up the word and it said it was archaic, that it's not used anymore, but it used to be used centuries ago. And then it's coming back into use as slang. So I kind of put it off to the side and said, okay, maybe you wouldn't use this in like a cover letter or something like that. But we talked about how language then changes, you know, and how this word might come back into general usage. But they took it off, and I wish they wouldn't have, because it was kind of neat to talk about those kinds of things. So we would do this, and then we would do some of the pages from some of these workbooks that I don't even think you need those, because I think if you just make the matrix and the sums and then do some spelling, and then they can just come up with something from that they're interested in and make some more matrices and sums. But that's how I got started with it. So I've never used the mini matrix maker or anything like that. Let's see here. Then these are our notes from last session and from this session. And this co-founder of Structured Word Inquiry explains SWI. We're going to do that. I'm going to show that video in a moment here after I show this video. And then I just have some guided notes from my class, my class from the dyslexia program. And then I have some various articles that have to do with morphology. And then there's a morphology professional development plan that was handed out to us as an example of a professional development plan when we had to do one. And then I did mine on syntax and semantics, and that's in the syntax and semantics. This is a sample here. Morpheme Magic is a book that came up last session that folks were asking about. And this is for older kids. I do see that, I don't know how to do this. I am on a loaner computer here. I do see that they have, the Morpheme Magic people now have a book for younger kids. And I know that we have somebody using Morpheme Magic in her classroom, and she can probably share more about how that's going. There's cards that you can put up, and then there are, like here's a suffix, able and ibble. So I haven't done a lesson with that because I've been working all on bases. And then there's a paragraph. So I've typed up all these paragraphs and then had the kids see what words fit in there. And then I show them these, but I have them in mixed up order. But if you can see here, there's kind of a red flag because we learned in our first session that you cannot just take pieces of words and then add them together always to get a exact definition of the word. And that's definitely what they are trying to do here, even with the bases that I've used, or what they would call roots. Okay, and then they talk a little bit about it, and then their students are supposed to keep a notebook about it. And that's the page spread that you would see on the suffix. And then they have prefixes, and then they have bases. And then this is from the William Van Cleve. It's called like PS, suffixes, prefixes, roots, or something like that. And both of these books are very expensive. I want to say like $50 each, and I'm just not sure they're worth it. So this has a whole bunch of words. So with able, A-B-L-E, and it says that it comes to us from Latin, means able to or can be, and then phrases, and then sentences. And here is, let's see here. Okay, more. And then they do have connected text in the Van Cleve book. And then here's IBLE, meaning the same. And then now I read they have Latin in here, but I had read that one was a little bit of a different etymology than the other, and I don't remember what it was. But anyway, words, phrases, sentences, and then connected text. So that's what you would see if you got Morphine Magic or the Van Cleve books. And another curriculum that's a multi-syllable word curriculum. So I have a multi-syllable word curriculum. It's called SIPS Challenge. And it does look a little bit at morphological transformations and things like that, but nothing to the extent that we're looking at when we look at making word matrices and word sums. So this is the rewards curriculum, and there's 2 levels here, and it's from Anita Archer, who you may know from Explicit Instruction. And it has, here you can see some reviews of vowel combinations and then reading of polysyllabic words. And I would say this is, she does have meanings here, prefixes and suffixes, and she does have content area vocabulary, but I'd still say it's more of a phonological more than a morphological approach to polysyllabic word reading. But that's what the rewards curriculum looks like on the inside. And I do like that they have that connected text there. I don't have that. I just photocopied that from another educator who had it at a conference that I attended. Okay, and then this is vocabulary from classical roots. I got this off the internet from a distributor called Christian Book. And what it does is it gives us 2 roots in each, or 2 bases, we would call them bases, in each lesson. So here you have the GRAD and the SENS. They give you some words, and then you match definitions. Then they give you definitions of these words, and then you have to find synonyms, find the meaning in context, look at adding some suffixes, and then this is from the inside cover of the student book, roots, prefixes, and suffixes. So it's a workbook, and so from these, then I would just have these would be our guided spelling words, like gradually, graduate, graduate, and graduate. The kids would leave with their packet, and then those would be the guided spelling words for the next week. This is also that, but it's the teacher's guide, and then I got this from somewhere. These are the levels that they have. So the more traditional levels of morphology instruction, grades 4 and up. And then for the student lesson that I just showed you, here are here's the teacher's guide, and there's a little bit of a script in there and how we could talk to the kids about it and activities we could have them do. With all of these, I feel like they could be a jumping off point. There's some good stuff in there, but again, I don't think you have to buy expensive books in order to do this work, because you can just do the word matrices and the word sums, or do the word sums and make matrices from there. And then the last thing I wanted to show you in here is learning from love. If you go to Real Spellers, they have, oh no, this is the spelling, well, it's a Real Spellers toolbox. They have a sample lesson. It's like 14 pages long. So I just condensed it and did this with my students. You may remember that was one of the bases that we had up on the cabinet. And so we talked about that U, V, and W all come from the same letter in Latin. Again, this is from this website up here. And that UV is not an acceptable letter order in English, nor is UU, because they look like W when they first started doing the typeface. So then you replace U with O in words where U is not acceptable. And there's some examples there. And then that we don't end words in English with U for the most part and not with V. And then this is how we would replace these things with, like, UV would be with OV. That's how we end up with love. And then we talked a bit about the E, which I think is coming up in our next session, or the section after that, as far as E at the end of a word does not always serve to make the first vowel long. There's a lot of different purposes that E at the end of a word can have. So those are some resources that are there in the Morphology Google Drive. And that's a little bit of information about what I have been doing to kind of start this out, just to kind of start thinking about morphology and working with it explicitly with my kids. Although, as I said, Sue Hagelin would say, just wherever it can come up, you don't have to do explicit lessons that you plan out. It can just be more focusing on the structure of words when you're doing literacy activities.